And as Richard said at the beginning, the icons that came up, he said he thought reflected challenge, and it certainly does. So I'd like to start off with a quote which talks about the scale of the challenge that we're now facing today. And the quote goes like this: "It's moving too fast. It's revolution, not evolution. Now, there are many accelerations at once, and one of the biggest problems is the difficulty of mankind to cope with it. I don't know whether political leaders or business leaders can easily handle it." Now, that was a quote by Ian Conn, who was the then CEO of Centrica, a part of the British gas utilities world. And that wasn't in the last year. That was quoted in March 2018. So a lot of these accelerations were happening before COVID even became a thing. Now, the last decade of digital acceleration has been, you might say, rapid. We've seen nothing like it in the last 12 months. And the VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is now our default operating environment. So what Con was saying was this: the pace of change and the scale of the challenge we're now facing has become too big for all of us. We can't cope with it individually. And his prediction came true. In the following 12 months, Centrica's profits dropped by almost 1 billion. Huge loss for British Gas, and funny old thing, Con's no longer the CEO. And all this was before COVID was even a thing. Now, the reason this has become a problem is that the strategy we think and the decision-making tools that we've learned in business schools over the last 10, 20 plus years, they're ill suited for the world we're now facing into. And if we didn't think it was a VUCA world then it certainly is now. And the last 12 months have proven that. And we've seen an acceleration within 6 months, what we'd normally expect within 6 years. So these previous techniques are no longer fit for purpose. They were created in a different world where life was predictable, pace of change was manageable, we knew what was coming, and we could have long-term plans and apply a waterfall mentality to the projects and programs that we worked for. But then we moved into the digital world, and that mentality just didn't work anymore. So we saw new ways of working evolve, experimentation, test and learn, let's become agile, but that's not working out too well either. Digital transformations have become the new big thing to do, and in the last 5 years, numerous reports are showing that over 80% of these have failed. Now, one might say that these new ways of working aren't working. And if we recall the results from the last week's poll that Richard showed earlier, there's a focus on technology and process. And this is probably one of the underlying reasons why these things are failing. And as I said, this has been accelerated. And while these technologies and new ways of working might seem to have accelerated over the last few years, what hasn't changed are our ways of thinking. It seems that we're still stuck in a mindset where we're mentally not keeping up with the pace of change in technology and also the ways of working that we've adopted. So why is that? Well, we kind of think the solution is technology. We think it's process, but the solution isn't a tool or a checkbox. It's the way we think. Now, we're all faced with biases. We're human. It's only natural. But these cognitive biases that we have affect the way we think. They affect the way we work, the way we plan, and the way we execute on a day-to-day basis. So while we may think technology and process are the answer for a digital world, if you look at business agility, and the Business Agility Institute report for the last 3 years has said that the biggest, most prolific challenge to digital transformations and these new ways of working is leadership. It's not technology, it's not processes, it's leadership. And this is a people problem we're facing now. What we've also seen today in that second poll is that people want culture. People want internal behaviors that they can feel part of. That's the number one thing in organizations they want. And this is counter to this desire for technology and processes that we've seen so far. So looking at previous ways of working and project management, we talked about people, process, technology in that order. But I sense that what we've seen in the last decade is that we flip that to technology first, focusing on the shiny things we want to build or adopt. What's the latest thing we've read about? Then we focus on new processes, implementing these change processes, which unfortunately just become a checkbox exercise. So what you end up doing is ticking a box rather than doing the thing that brings the value you're trying to achieve. And then the third thing of people, well, that's kind of falling off the edge. It's just an assumed thing that happens, but it clearly hasn't been for some time now. So I think what we need to do is arm our leaders with better tools and techniques to allow them to think differently. And not only just for them to think differently, as Ian Conn said, you can't do this on your own anymore. This is something that you have to enable the masses with and to source the wisdom of the crowd. What we need to do is enable our people. And Richard mentioned at the beginning that one of the most toxic things in any organization is groupthink. And what red team thinking, the evolution of red teaming over the years has become, is a set of tools and techniques that enable a contrarian viewpoint in an organization to allow your plans and thinking to be challenged accordingly and to ensure the best ideas win. So, how do we challenge our own thoughts? Now, Dr. Daniel Kahneman said in a recent podcast a great quote. He said that to do that, you have to protect your dissenters in your organization. And you do that by having a red team thinking capability. Because if everybody has a critical thinking mindset, then this allows you to be able to challenge internally in a professional, collegiate manner, which is what we need. Now, the red teaming tools and techniques also allow you to do this anonymously if you have to, because, funny old thing, in many organizations, there isn't the psychological safety that people have to feel safe to have a viewpoint. They don't feel comfortable speaking up and certainly not to challenge the ideas from above. But by having such a capability within your organization, we found that red team thinking allows you to surface those ugly truths that we don't like to face while we hide behind those comforting lies. And by doing that, and by not outsourcing your thinking to a large consultancy or someone else, you can create this internal capability where everybody internally is thinking differently, but aligned across the organization. And they're focused on the right outcomes that need to be achieved, identifying those threats early and also supporting the opportunities that exist, but just haven't surfaced yet. And in doing this, the leadership within are then able to make those better decisions faster. And you have a culture that's created that provides all the people and those leaders with the right amount of challenge to ensure they have the best information and a workforce that feels included and engaged. Now, the answers that any organization need lie within. You just have to surface those answers. And how do you do that? And that starts with your people. Get them to think differently, get that right, and the technologies and the processes will follow. And that's the power, we believe, of red team thinking.